Did coronavirus escape from a Wuhan bioweapons laboratory? Might sound like the plot of a James Bond movie, but it's looking more and more like that's the case. According to a report on Fox News by Brett Baer, sources believe that the coronavirus outbreak originated in a Wuhan lab as part of China's efforts to compete with the United States. As Baer explains, there's increasing confidence that the outbreak originated in a Wuhan laboratory, though not as a bioweapon, but as part of China's attempt to demonstrate that its efforts to identify and combat viruses are equal and greater than the capabilities of the United States. Multiple sources who've been briefed on the details of early actions by China's government and who have seen relevant materials tell Fox News. So Baer's got a report saying multiple people are out there telling him, and these multiple people have access to the information, have been briefed on it, and are being told that the most likely explanation at this point for the origins of the Wuhan coronavirus is itself a Wuhan bioweapons laboratory. Now, there's one person that flagged this possibility that really deserves a shout out at this point, and that would be Senator Tom Cotton of the great state of Arkansas, who looks like he really got it right, and as you can see in this clip.
The Lancet published a study last weekend demonstrating that of the original 40 cases, 14 of them had no contact with the seafood market, including patient 0. As one epidemiologist said, that virus went into the seafood market before it came out of the seafood market. We still don't know where it originated. Could have been another seafood market. Could have been a farm. Could have been a food processing company. I would note that Wuhan also has China's only biosafety level 4 super laboratory that works with the world's most deadly pathogens, to include, yes, coronavirus.
Now, when Tom Cotton made the suggestion, he got tons of flack from the mainstream media. Washington Post published an article entitled "Tom Cotton Keeps Repeating a Coronavirus Conspiracy Theory That Was Already Debunked." So, looks like they have some explaining to do. But it raises a bigger question about what exactly is a conspiracy theory, and why does the media get away with calling things conspiracy theories that are not, and also not apologizing for accusing somebody like Tom Cotton of being a conspiracist when facts reveal that he later is not and had it right. So we'll get into that a little later. But first, Human Events has a YouTube channel, which you should please subscribe to. We've just started out. We're trying to put out daily content. The more subscribers we have and the more you guys share this out, the more content we're going to do. So please hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, I guess, because you get notifications, and support what we're doing here. Back to the matter at hand. Washington Post again. Tom saying that Tom Cotton kept repeating a coronavirus conspiracy theory that was already debunked. So here's some of the stuff that they reported. In response to Cotton's remarks, as well as in previous interviews with the Washington Post, numerous experts dismissed the possibility that the coronavirus may be man-made. Whoa. Different things. Saying it's man-made is different than saying it was being studied in a lab and it might have come out in a lab. It might well have been what's called zoonotic in origin. It came from an animal, and that's what the sources suspect. But it might well have been studied there and leaked out of there. That's what Cotton's saying. This is the Washington Post strawmanning Cotton, accusing him of making an argument he did not make, which is, generally a pretty easy way to try and go after people. This was not the only outlet that went off after Tom Cotton in this way. That the New York Times on February 17th said he repeats a fringe theory of coronavirus origins. Scientists have dismissed suggestions that the Chinese government was behind the outbreak, but it's the kind of tale that gains traction among those who see China as a threat. Now this looks insane. Now this looks like these people have just massive apologies to make to Cotton, right? You have the Baer report talking about how multiple sources believe that this came out of a weapons lab, that it may be the costliest government cover-up of all time, that while this ultimately was a naturally occurring strain of coronavirus, it was being studied at the laboratory. It didn't just come out of some random wet market in Wuhan. And even the Washington Post itself published an article from Josh Rogan saying that State Department cables warned of safety issues at Wuhan lab studying that coronavirus. It's almost like Tom Cotton might have known something that the rest of us didn't, given that he's, somebody who's in Congress and has access to briefings that we don't have access to. This is just a remarkable story. 2 years before the novel coronavirus pandemic upended the world, U.S. embassy officials visited a Chinese research facility in the city of Wuhan several times and sent 2 official warnings back to Washington about inadequate safety at the lab, which was conducting risky studies on coronaviruses from bats. So it's just really obvious that this was not a ridiculous theory. They were studying these coronaviruses at a lab. It originated a few miles from, or within a few thousand yards of the lab, I believe. And it easily could have come out of this lab without it being a man-made bioweapon and without it being an intentional release. China's didn't have the best security at a weapons lab where they're studying the coronaviruses, and in that same city, coronavirus originated and started spreading. Seems to make sense. But that doesn't stop people. Like, even now, you still have people trying to push back on this and claim it's sort of fringe, as though it's a conspiracy theory. Vanity Fair published an article from Joe Pompeo on April 10th, that's 6 days ago, inside the viral spread of a coronavirus origin theory, a Wuhan biosafety laboratory, bat blood, a wet market, scientists, pangolins, politicians looking for someone to blame, the perfect ingredients for a story that won't go away. Okay, 6 days later, we're told that this is literally the intelligence community's consensus, and Pompeo's writing this whole detailed story about how this story just won't go away. These crazy people. They're not calling it a conspiracy theory anymore. That's probably a smart editor being like, this looks like it could be real. We need to be careful. But there's still this underlying subtext of calling it fringe. And it's sort of funny, like in this piece, the author, Pompeo, accuses Cotton of creating the subtext. Here's a quote. Cotton didn't say so outright, but there's an unmistakable subtext to his commentary, implying that SARS-CoV-2 could have even been man-made. SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, or maybe the Wuhan virus. That might be good. We have such laboratories ourselves in the United States run by our military, in large part done for preventative purposes, etc. And so basically what Pompeo is saying is like, okay, you didn't say it was a man-made bioweapon, but you implied it. It's like, no, he didn't. He didn't imply that. It's like this whole, it actually connects to the whole idea of dog whistles, right? Like, Republican politicians are always accused of meaning something different than what they say by Democrats. And that there's the secret language between Republicans that only apparently Democratic commentators understand. It's always nonsense. It's a way to justify strawmans. Strawman, this is a classic strawman. Pompeo is accusing Cotton of saying something he did not say and then rebutting that thing that Cotton never claimed in the first place. It's weird. But there's also something else this reminds me of, and this whole debate about what is a conspiracy theory, what's not, was Tom Cotton engaged in it, and based on strawmanning people. And you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of the Notre Dame fire, right? You guys remember that about literally almost a year ago today, on April 15th, just about a year ago today, the Notre Dame fire burned down the ceiling of Notre Dame and nearly burned down the entire building. And if you'll remember, a lot of people, right after it happened, were very quickly like, it wasn't arson. For example, the Daily Beast, Will Sommer, always a really rigorous journalist. Notre Dame Cathedral fire conspiracy theories flourish after investigators say there's no proof of terrorism. Gotcha, righties. Gotcha. An even worse one. Far-right fearmongers push bizarro narratives about Notre Dame fire, namely that it could have been arson. So, based on this sort of thing, you think, oh, well, there's obviously like already a very clear and coherent explanation of what happened at Notre Dame, right? We know what happened, right? No, we don't actually. Yesterday, Sarah Cascone published 1 year after the tragic Notre Dame fire that caused the devastating blaze remains shrouded in mystery. Investigators still don't have access to the area where the fire began. Oops, we still don't know what happened in the Notre Dame fire. And yet, despite the fact that literally a year later we don't actually know, officials are like, we don't know, we think. There's guesses that it might have been a cigarette, that it might have been something else. There's guesses. We were told literally like the same day that the fire happened, well, there's no evidence of terrorism. It's irresponsible to claim arson. It's a conspiracy theory to claim it's arson. Never mind the fact that it's literally definitionally not a conspiracy theory to claim that the Notre Dame fire was arson, because arson can be done by a single person, and a conspiracy requires 2 or more people. And it's similar, right? Like, Tom Cotton wasn't necessarily talking about a conspiracy theory. What he implied maybe suggested a Chinese cover-up. It's not that not like China has, lockdown of information in China or anything. But it wasn't a conspiracy theory in the sense that he wasn't saying it was intentional. He wasn't saying it was a bioweapon created for this purpose. He wasn't saying it was intentionally released. He was just saying, think accidental release from the nearby bioweapons lab is at least a possibility we need to account for. Similarly with Notre Dame, you would be irresponsible if you weren't saying arson's at least a possibility that we need to account for until we rule it out. In fact, when you have a burned down building anywhere in the country, that's probable cause to investigate the scene for arson. You make sure it's not arson before you assume it's that it was an accident. In the same way that when you have a dead body in a prison cell, perhaps somebody like Jeffrey Epstein's, you start with the assumption that it was murder and you work back to prove that it was suicide. I'm not making any claims on the Epstein thing. I'm beyond that at this point. But let's just leave it at, there's sort of people are getting out ahead of themselves when they say there's no evidence of arson or there's no reason to even consider the possibility of arson. That's just literally wrong and irrational. But there's another dynamic here to talk about, too, is that the Democrats and the media, but I repeat myself, have a way of talking about Notre Dame and talking about things like the coronavirus and being like, you are a conspiracy theorist, right? But realize that they never use that language to discuss the things that they assert about the world that are bizarre. For example, we just learned recently, based on some work done by Chuck Grassley and another senator, that a lot of the FBI actually suspected that the Steele dossier claims are Russian disinformation. And yet, our media spread a literal conspiracy theory, right? A theory that the President Trump and his administration colluded with the Russian government for years. That's a literal conspiracy theory, not like Notre Dame, a literal one. There's actually a theory that people conspired. And yet that is never referred to as a conspiracy theory. It's never referred to as a conspiracy theory. Meanwhile, like the thought that maybe someone, an unspecified person, might have done something unspecified to lead to Notre Dame burning down, that is somehow a beyond the pale of conspiracy theory that we can't even consider. What's going on here? Well, Oliver Darcy gave us a hint also yesterday. This quotation is remarkable. Quote, still really quite jarring to see official White House accounts used in an effort to delegitimize credible press. Credible press? Who are the credible press? Is it CNN that spread this Russiagate conspiracy theory? Are the New York Times and Washington Post who mocked Tom Cotton for daring to suggest that the coronavirus might have come out of a Wuhan pathogens lab accidentally? I mean, these are the people who are credible? I think what you can do here is you actually take this word credible and you could substitute the word aristocratic. That's actually what's really going on here. It's not about who's credible that's being disrespected, that Oliver's pissed. He's a member now, as a part of CNN, of an aristocratic class of journalists who have it in place, the idea that you should not dishonor them, that the president should know better than to dishonor aristocrats and their privileges and to say that they might well lie. You just don't do that to other aristocrats. What's going on here is an example of the underlying dynamic that explains so much of how our press behaves. I wrote an article a while ago about it called Carlos Maza's Reign of Terror. It talked about how, in that case, Carlos Maza could, on the one hand, advocate for British politicians to have milkshakes thrown at them if they were right-wing, and on the other hand, try and get Stephen Crowder kicked off of YouTube. Right? That's a function of aristocratic privilege. He believes that and doing violence against right-wingers is acceptable, insulting right-wingers is acceptable, but that if a right-winger insults him, that's totally unacceptable. That's the behavior of an aristocrat. Similarly, think about how the media is carrying water for Joe Biden with regard to the Tara Reade allegations. Somebody like Michelle Goldberg, on the one hand, saying that our entire ruling class is pigs based on the accusations against Kavanaugh that were completely unsubstantiated, and then, casting doubt on the story of Tara Reade. The media, if you are a member of the Democrats, you're an aristocrat, and being an aristocrat entitles you to a certain amount of charity and a certain amount of essentially understanding and skepticism of accusations against you that you don't get if you're a conservative. This is a privilege issue. And understand that the same reason that the media went so hard after Tom Cotton and got it wrong and refuses to apologize, the same reason that the media got out in front and said, oh my God, Notre Dame can't be arson and the people who are saying so is conspiracy theories. This is the exact same reason that the media can proffer a Russiagate conspiracy theory and never apologize for it and can do all these crazy things. We need to undermine media privilege. And at the end of this article that you should read on humanevents.com, I have a suggestion. It's time to overturn New York Times versus Solon, which is the case that gives protection to the media when it defames public figures like Tom Cotton. Tom Cotton should be able to go to court and sue for defamation and not have to prove that the Washington Post and the New York Times intentionally lied. We want to move past that. At a certain point, the Washington Post and the New York Times need to be more responsible. They are the supposed paper of record, and they're behaving like children. It's time to punish them and to make them bear the costs of their negligent defamation when they do so. Anyway, that's all for now. But before you go, and if you have not done this, please, again, hit that subscribe button. Boom. And subscribe to Human Events YouTube so you'll get more of this kind of rigorous analysis of what's happening in modern times. And we have a lot of videos, as you can see. We've already put up 8 or 9 videos at this point, and we're going to keep them coming. Keep them coming just for you. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you tomorrow.